Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Kevin Ingram, the voice of Vanderbilt Radio for basketball. Kevin appears on the guest line that is presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael is a local carpenter and a lifelong Vanderbilt fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case for my prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you're in the market for custom woodwork, give Michael a call. That number, 615-830-9458. You can also text him at that number as well. Our question and answer session with Kevin Ingram is sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call. That number, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Anyway, now on to our interview with Kevin Ingram. Kevin Ingram joins us straight off a trip from Richmond where he called Vanderbilt's close loss to VCU last night. Kevin, thanks for joining us today. Hope you were doing well.
I'm good. A little tired. We've been on the road a lot, but doing just fine.
Yeah, what time did you get in last night?
We probably landed about 11:30, and I don't live very far from the airport, so I was home a little before midnight, so it wasn't too bad.
Well, we'll get into, obviously, the part of the game that has everybody buzzing. But before we do that, what were your just overall thoughts on the game and how Vanderbilt played last night?
I thought Vanderbilt played pretty well for a lot of the game. I mean, when you play VCU, you sort of know what you're going to get. I mean, you know they're going to pressure you the whole game, and they almost like lure you into thinking you're okay by the time you get to midcourt, and then they slap the traps on, or at least they try to. And I thought Robbins getting that second foul early in the game was really big. That really hurt Vanderbilt with him having to spend so much time in the first half on the bench. And then Jordan Wright with his back problem wasn't able to play very much in the second half, and that hurt as well. But the lineup that they had out there for a lot of the game, I thought was pretty effective. And you saw Trey Thomas come back and hit some threes. Myles Stute shot it great. And William Robbins was terrific in the second half, and he was total difference maker. And Vanderbilt clawed back from double figures, took the lead briefly, and then never could really get back over the hump. They had it back even a time or two down the stretch. But VCU made some plays. Vanderbilt still had a chance inside that last minute, but less than 20 seconds left at the end of the shot clock. It was well defended. The guy just made one, and that was a big difference maker in the game. Talk about dagger shots, that was one of them. But overall, I thought Vanderbilt did okay. It was a wild game. It was a crazy atmosphere, and of course, everything involved with the technical fouls and all of that. But you kind of came away feeling a little empty. It felt like Vanderbilt might could have gotten that one done, but came up 5 points short.
Yeah, if it weren't for the technical foul aspect, it feels like the story was sort of that Stute and Robbins just about single-handedly kept them in the game.
Yeah, they were both just outstanding. Robbins scoring at close range and getting to the free throw line, and Myles, you could tell he had the eye from three-point land. He's really shot it great so far this season. He was 50% coming in and had a good night last night. But, yeah, just a little the big shots and turnovers, the points off turnovers are really a big difference in that game. And like I say, you know what you're getting into when you play VCU. And they hadn't had Ace Baldwin, their top guard, for a big stretch of games. He had hurt his wrist, and the word was he wasn't going to be back until the middle of December. Well, lo and behold, there he is in the starting lineup on November 30th. So much for mid-December. I don't know if they were just kind of slow playing that one to not really tip their hand a little bit as far as when he might return, but he was a total difference maker. He had a career-high 28 points in that game, and if they don't have him, Vanderbilt probably wins. But, it was Robbins and Myles are really good, and, I feel like Ty Lawrence is having a nice season so far, and like I said, Trey came back, and, I think for this team, you just need more contributors. You can rely on, there's about a core of 3 or 4 guys you can rely on every game. But if you can get, 5 or 6 points out of more people, it feels like it'll serve this team well.
Yeah, Baldwin and Watkins for VCU were questionable heading into last night. So much for questionable. Those two kids end up leading them in minutes with 33 and 31 respectively, and Baldwin had just had screws put in his wrist.
Yeah, and he was, he's a guy who's an all-conference player and all-conference defender, but he was their primary ball handler, and you wanted to try to get the ball out of his hands, and then they got it to Watkins on that possession that really made the difference in the game, and he was able to, hit that tough shot over Tyron Lawrence, who, he was right in his face, and it was the end of the shot clock. You thought, boy, they get a stop right here, and you got a chance to go down and tie with a three, and that was such a gigantic shot. But I thought Baldwin was really good. They have the ball in his hands, and he tries to get into you and get to the free throw line, and he can do it a whole lot of the time. Those two are really good.
Okay, now for the part everybody's probably been waiting for. You had the best view of what went on with the technical fouls, maybe what precipitated it, those sorts of things. I don't think anybody in the house had a better seat than you have, so just give us the background of what went on.
Well, I think I don't know that I had the best seat. Actually, we were.
Do announcers get fined for criticizing officials? Just asking for a friend.
I don't know.
Here.
I'm going to tiptoe that line. I don't really want to find out. I don't know that I can afford that. I don't have as deep a pockets as some do. From my perspective, really, what really set Jerry Stackhouse off was the technical that was called on Liam Robbins after he got the dunk. He thought he got fouled, and he tapped the top of his head, and I don't know if that. I think that maybe did something that Jerry Stackhouse made reference after the game. That's something that kids do, just kind of, joking around or talking smack or whatever. I didn't see what the big deal was with that, but apparently the officials did because they teed up Liam Robbins for that. And if you're around Liam and you watch him play a lot, he's not a very demonstrative guy or a smack talker or anything like that. For him to get a technical foul to me was crazy to begin with, but especially for that particular thing. And then Coach Stackhouse was really, really upset after that, and he got out. It was time for the under-8 timeout when the whistle blew. It was with 7:59 to go, and so they were going to the timeout anyway. And Coach Stackhouse got out there, and you could kind of see the first technical coming, no question about it. And then the coaching staff was trying to get him back to the bench and settle down, and he went back for a little more and got the second technical and was escorted off. And I think there was a little bit of misperception about him being let out of the building by security and all that. He wasn't like
it was his own guy, wasn't it?
Security. It was his own guy. Yeah, Vanderbilt. The coaches have a police officer that travels with him, and it was Vanderbilt's guy that just escorted him back to the locker room. It wasn't like he was being hauled out of there or anything. But for the last 8 minutes, it was Adam Mazzari leading the team. If you watch practice, he's one of the voices you hear the most in addition to Coach Stackhouse. So I certainly understood why Jerry was unhappy with the technical that was called on Liam Robbins, because I didn't really understand that particular call. And I don't think it was just that. I think there had been an accumulation of things where he felt like the fouls were a little bit slanted in VCU's favor, and they had shot certainly a lot more free throws. And then right there with the 3 technicals, there were 6 free throws awarded to VCU, and they made 4 out of 6. Baldwin went to the line and hit 4 out of 6 right there. And you think about that little exchange, and it really could have been worse than 4 points, but still that's 4 free points basically for VCU, and in a 5-point game that is a big difference maker. But yeah, it got a lot of national attention. I know it was all over social media last night, the clips and everything. But the first part of it that really set him off, the technical foul on Liam Robbins, it felt like maybe that's something that could have been let go.
Yeah, let me give you both sides of that. I was exchanging texts with a friend of mine who's on another Power 5 staff this morning, and he said before the season that particular thing was a big point of emphasis in the films that they send the coaches. So part of me is going, well, that's kind of on Vanderbilt. It looked pretty innocuous, but if the officials are saying this is going to be a big deal this year, and I think probably particularly when you're in somebody else's building, it's something you ought to heed. But I also had the same person tell me, hey, I've seen good officials in that spot warn a kid and say, hey, we're not going to tolerate that anymore, and pull them aside and do it that way rather than just giving the technical. And frankly, feels to me like that might have been the better way to handle it.
I think so too, and what Coach Stackhouse said after the game, I think that was part of his issue with it too. Is like, if you have a problem with it, can you at least give him a warning, not just tee him up right here. It felt like the technical was a little extreme, especially if he hadn't been given a warning or anything leading up to that. So yeah, to be honest, I mean, I knew they liked taunting and those sorts of things that maybe had been a point of emphasis. I didn't know about that particular gesture or whatever, but I don't know. It felt like a bit of an overreaction, but again, I'm not coaching or officiating games. I just watching from a distance, but it seems like they could have given him a warning, and maybe that might have certainly been the better way to handle that situation.
That part aside, was that an especially physical or chippy game?
I didn't think it was like really chippy. Like, there wasn't a lot of, I didn't see a lot of like real smack talking or pushing and shoving after the whistle or anything like that. Like, I didn't really notice hardly any of that throughout the game. I mean, it was fairly physical. I mean, Virginia Commonwealth, they guard you really close and they press and all those things, and played physical defense. But I didn't see anything was like dirty or out of the ordinary as far as the game went. So as far as that goes, I didn't see a lot of chippiness other than your average little jawing that goes back and forth in the course of a game. Like, to me, some of that stuff is just stuff that comes with the territory. I didn't think there was anything out of the ordinary as far as that goes.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing. It's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible. What was up with the first half substitutions last night? Because if I recall correctly, Vanderbilt played 13 guys in the first half.
Well, I think part of it was, Vanderbilt's been down a couple guys, and the illness went around the team last week when we were out in California. So some of the guys were just coming back, and they were down 4 players in that game against Fresno State the other night. Quentin Malora-Brown was out sick for that game, and a couple of guards have been out. Obviously, Trey Thomas is coming back for the first time since about the second game of the season from the knee injury. And like I say, you had a couple other players that were sick, and Jordan Wright's back problem has been an issue. I think a lot of the thinking was play a variety of guys and just basically steal some minutes for the guys that you're going to need down the stretch. And that's felt like what it was. Jerry went pretty deep into the bench in that first half, and we saw a little bit of everybody. I think we saw almost every player that he brought on the trip, including Graham Carlton, who's a walk-on. We saw Noah Shelby for a little bit. Lee Dort has been receiving some minutes pretty much every game, and Malik Dia and Colin Smith has certainly played the most of the freshmen so far this season. But yeah, I think it was mostly just about saving some energy for the main core of guys who are going to be the ones that played the bulk of the minutes in the second half.
Yeah, someone on our board said Jordan Wright was wearing a weight belt or something like that while he was on the bench. That's typically something you do for back support. I would think, and just looking at his stat line, he didn't score last night. It was so uncharacteristic. 4 turnovers, no assists. He's got to be hurting really, really badly to put up those numbers in just 14 minutes, which I'm guessing is the lowest total he's played in, man, I don't know, probably 3 years.
Yeah, I would think so. He's usually a guy who's out there for a big chunk of the game. I think he got injured actually in the game against St. Mary's last week in California, and then he struggled with it in the Fresno State game. And I don't know if you'd really call it a weight belt, but it's the one belt that he was wearing out there in California for that Fresno game, it looked like it had like electrodes on it or whatever, which would, stimulate the back muscles and, just try to provide some therapy that way, or treatment or whatever you want to call it. I don't know that I noticed him wearing that a lot last night. It was more of like just a wrap around his midsection. And you could tell he got 2 fouls early in the second half, and he just wasn't moving around very well. He looked so uncomfortable, and he's trying to guard plays a couple of times, and you could tell he just couldn't move like he needed to defend. And after he got that second foul, I think they decided just to shut him down for the rest of the half. And I sort of wonder if we might get into a situation where they shut him down for a game or two here and try to get him well, because that is a key guy for this team that you're going to need certainly as you get into SEC play coming up in a few weeks.
What's the prognosis for Paul Lewis?
That I don't know. I think he should be back soon. I know he battled illness and has not played in a while. That's another valuable guy. You talk about the backup to Ezra Magnon, the point guard. I mean, Paul is going to be a guy who's going to play some significant minutes there at that number 2 point guard spot. And if he's healthy and ready to go, I assume he still will. But I don't really have a good answer on when he might be back.
Looks like their rotation right now is Stute, Robbins, Lawrence, Wright, Magnon, Malora Brown, Colin Smith are the main ones, followed by Dia and Ansong. Is that, and I guess Trey Thomas too, if you include minutes per game. He's missed 3. Is that about what it's going to look like come SEC play, you think?
I would think so. That sounds about right. I sort of think Malik Dia, I feel like as the season goes along, we'll see improvement from him. He's a big guy. He's a good shooter, and he feels like he can, help this team, which, at times struggles a little bit offensively. I think it's the other end of the court that Jerry Stackhouse wants to see these guys show the improvement. A lot of playing time seems to be based on how well they play defensively. But I would say that group you named are the ones that we're going to see. It's been interesting, the games in California and really the game last night, and maybe even going back to the game at Temple. You see a lot of people in the first half, but then as the second half goes along and you get a little more into the key spots in the game where you're trying to nail down a win, you're seeing them just play a pretty steady core of guys and maybe try to steal some rest for Magnon or a couple of the others. But it's those dudes, and those are the ones that I think are going to be the key ones as we move toward SEC play.
The Robbins-Malora Brown playing time split has been kind of interesting because Malora Brown was the starter to begin the season, was probably playing a little bit more. It's just become evident to me, and I'm sure it is to Jerry Stackhouse too, that he's their best player. They've got to have him on the floor as much as they can. Now, foul trouble has been prohibitive. At times, he's had 4 in each of his last 3 games. But if he can stay out of foul trouble, is this a situation where he's getting maybe 27, 28, 9 minutes a game? I think they have to at this point.
You're talking about Robbins, right?
Yeah. Is that what I said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would tend to agree with you on that. I mean, we saw how valuable he was when he went out of the game with the second foul in the first half, and it just makes all the difference in the world in how Vanderbilt plays offensively. The rim protection element of it too on the other end. He had 8 blocks in the game against Fresno State, so he can make things difficult for people trying to take it inside. But if he's not in, I mean, that's a big chunk. And we've seen a lot more versatile game, it feels like, out of him in this first 7-game stretch of the season. Last year, you saw some post-ups, and then you saw him shoot a lot of three-pointers. This season, it's not as many three-pointers after the first game or two. It's been more down low, posting him on the block and letting him try to hit a jump hook or score at close range. Or we've seen him get to the middle of the paint and hit a turnaround or a fadeaway, and those shots have looked great. That's something we didn't see out of him last season. It looks like it's really developed for him. But yeah, we're seeing more of the all-around game for Liam Robbins, and you got to like what you've seen if you're Vanderbilt fans.
Vanderbilt had 19 turnovers on Wednesday. I think 13 were in the first half. What adjustments did you see in the second half to take care of the ball better?
I think a lot of it was just being a little more patient against the pressure. And Ezra Magnon was the main ball handler, and they just did a better job of making the pass when they needed to. You play against that pressure, you want to get rid of the ball before the traps arrive. And, they still turned it over a couple times in the second half, but those turnovers really went down as you got deeper into the game. First half, it felt like it took a little bit to adjust to that. And, you see steals in midcourt, or you see, a wide pass that goes out of bounds, or somebody might fall down and get on the floor, and all of a sudden VCU has to go in the other direction. But it felt like that part of it steadied as the game went along. They didn't have quite as much trouble with that pressure.
Kevin, anything worth discussing or takeaways from the last week or two worth getting into before we end the show today?
I think for this team, just sort of finding its way. You sort of knew that not having Scottie Pippen Jr. and his 20 points a game, and not just that, but his ability to manufacture points when things aren't really going as smoothly as you want on offense, that's a lot to replace. To me, it's been a little more difficult than maybe I expected it to be, but I still think this team has a lot of room for growth. They've had some bad injury and health luck so far. Maybe those things will get better, and just root for good health for Jordan Wright, because that is really going to be a major factor. You hope hopefully his back situation won't be a long-term thing. But, man, it's been a really busy stretch here. November is always the most difficult month. You have football finishing up, you have basketball getting started, and just so much going on. And it's been nice today to have just a little bit of a breather. I was thinking about the stretch I've had for the last week and a half. I feel like I've been everywhere and done everything, but it's a lot of fun. And it'll be a 3-game stretch coming up for this team, and then a little bit of a break before they go to Chicago. But we'll see Wofford Saturday, and then Pitt and Grambling coming up next week.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. It's been just about 7-day work weeks since late July when they opened camp. Just to be able to sit down and have a little bit of margin in one schedule is kind of nice.
Yeah, it has been nice, and have a little bit of a breather and be home a little more in December. My family hasn't seen very much of me in the month of November. I think they're ready for me to be home a little while, so we'll all enjoy that.
Well, Kevin, thanks for taking your time today to join us. Any announcements for the radio network or anything before you leave today?
Yeah, just be sure to check us out. We'll be on with pregame on Saturday at 3:30 Central Time. Game starts at 4 over Memorial Gym, Vanderbilt and Wofford. We have weekly editions of our Anchor podcast. You can find that at Apple and Spotify, and then you can also listen to us on Monday night. We'll have Commodore Hour. We're going to kind of transition into basketball after finishing up football this past week.
Thanks for joining us, Kevin. We'll see you again soon.
Anytime, Chris. Hopefully, how'd you do at bowling the other night, by the way?
Oh, don't ask.
Okay.
I'm not the one toting my own ball around. So,
that was all kind of for show.
That's a lot of self-induced pressure.
That was, yeah. I almost went and took my bowling ball back and put it back in the car, and then I'm like, well, if I don't bring it in here, I won't be able to find one that I even remotely like. So, I broke 100, and we ended up bowling 3 games. We were having a good time, the guys I bowled with, and so it was moving pretty fast, and we bowled 3 games. And by the time we got to the 3rd game, I think my arm was about to fall off. I had not bowled in a while, but it was a good time. And George Plaster and the folks that help him with that do a great job. It was a really fun event.
Yeah, they did. Well, if bowling nines were the object, you would want me on your team. I'm the king of that.
Same here. Oh, yeah, I just couldn't pick up the spare. I could get the first 9. It was that final pin that was the challenge.
Yeah, I think that they ought to change the rules of bowling, because to me, it's way harder to knock all the pins down but one than it is to knock them all down.
Right, exactly.
I'm just gonna throw that out there. Well, Kevin, again, thank you for joining us. We'll catch you soon.
Anytime, Chris. Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk, Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group, and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at VandySports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.